About today, but this morning has been really strange in the way that it's come together. I feel like I've changed clothes twice because I wanted to ride my bike really bad this morning, and it was 48 degrees. So you put everything you can get on, and then you get to church and you do the first service and you go, I'm burning up, and so you change clothes, right? It's the time of year. Guys, I'm going to do something a little different today. I'm going to start off by saying this is my recommitment Sunday. And you might go, oh no, what has he done? Right? Isn't that what we do when we recommit when we do something wrong? Well, what about you recommit when you survive something? Right? This last Friday was my 2-year anniversary from my liver surgery. And here I sit, right? So when you go through something that's life-threatening, as a Christian, you need to recommit. And you say, what do you mean by that? A lot of people, especially Christians, when we go through something hard, we go, God, what did I do wrong? No, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but God chooses those who can bear hard things and allows them to go through it. Huh? Job, the whole book of Job wouldn't even be in the Bible if it weren't for that, right? You know, one of the people that I've learned the most from through reading the Bible is Daniel. Daniel was about 10 years old when he was taken into captivity. The other word for that is enslaved. And by the way, he wasn't black. He was brownish, our colorish, right? Slavery has been around since the beginning, honestly. But a lot of people would say, oh, he was a victim. Well, he could have been, but did he choose to be a victim? No. In fact, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as you know it, which is actually Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, that's their real names. A lot of people forget that part. That's their God-given name, which glorified God, and Nebuchadnezzar had them name something anti-God, right? And they had to wear that. But Daniel was about 10 years old. I say 10 to 15 when they were taken into captivity. He was immediately, more than likely, made a eunuch. He was immediately no longer full male. And then he was forced to learn Babylonian history, culture, language. Can you imagine your enemy? You have to be forcibly taken and made into something you don't want to be. But the things he could control, he controlled, and this is how he did it. He says, you know what? Can I not eat that pork that you're offering me to eat? And you go, why do you know it's pork? Because he saw it as disgusting, and to a Jew, pork was disgusting. Here's the crazy part. The guy that was in charge of him, the chief of the eunuchs, said, you know, if you look bad in about a week, the king will have my head. He goes, trust me, we won't look bad. And so they only ate vegetables. And when they did, guess what? They looked better than the other people. Was it because of the vegetables? No. It was because of his commitment. I'm going to be using that word a lot this morning. Commit, recommit. Part of the reason I can recommit to my faith is because I'm already committed, right? You can't recommit to something that you're not already committed to. I'm committed to this life of following Jesus, and therefore, as I go through this cancer battle, and here I am 2 years out, and you go, well, what's the significance of 2 years? Because at 2 years, most doctors will say you have a 90% survival rate. Before 2 years, and while you're in it, you don't, right? In fact, 2 years ago, 2 years and 4 months ago, the doctor looked at me and said, if you don't start this hard chemo, you will die. And I said, so I get to be with Jesus? And he goes, I'm telling you, you will die. And I'll say, God's in charge of that, not you. And then I said, God, I've already been through 2 chemos. What do you want me to do? And he says, I need you to go through this, Jim. And so I did. Not ever believing that it would heal me. Only God heals. But he will use doctors. He will use things that we don't even agree with. But here's the crazy part. He brought me through it. And here I sat 2 years out. 2 years later, 2 years after a 90% chance of dying to a 90% chance of living. So I'm recommitting. Well, what Daniel did is he recommitted. He was already committed to God. And so what he started doing every day, 3 times a day, in the house that he was in, he got at a window that faced the direction of Jerusalem, and he prayed every day that he could get to go home. 4 kings, and 70 years later, the children of Israel, many of them, were sent home under King Cyrus. But because Daniel was so valuable to King Cyrus wouldn't let him go. This slave boy who had come in at 10 to 15 years of age had now run 4 kingdoms and was in the 4th one. Here's the crazy part about that story. It's written down in Babylonian history, it's written down in Persian history, and it's written down in the history in the Bible. So people can say all day long, oh, the Bible ain't true. Oh, well, why does its history match Persian history? Why does its history match Babylonian history? I think that's called his story. So here's the deal. He prayed every day. Was he committed? Yes. Every time he went through a trial, and he had many of them, one of them right off the bat, he was probably 17, 18 years old. He had learned all of the custom, and he had learned all of the languages. He had learned everything he was supposed to learn according to Babylonian rule, and they brought him in at probably 19, 20, 21 years of age and said, Daniel, we have a dilemma. He goes, lay it on me. Well, the king had a couple of dreams. And he got mad at the fortune tellers and the soothsayers and the magicians because they wanted to know what the dream was, and he wouldn't tell them. So now we need to know the dream and the interpretation. And Daniel said, nobody but God can do that, but I will pray to that God. And guess what happens? Call me. Call me. See, what was going to happen is the king was going to kill all of the fortune tellers, all of the wise men in the land. Daniel goes in, tells him the dream, tells him the answer, and said, by the way, if you don't do this, everybody will die anyway. And God says, this is what God says. And Nebuchadnezzar said, okay, you'll live. In fact, not only will you live, I'm going to promote you to second in charge, second only to me. And that's where Daniel stayed under the next 3 kings. I want you to think about that. He was a slave, isn't he a victim? Not according to Daniel. He was enslaved. He couldn't go home to Jerusalem. Well, then why did he face Jerusalem to pray? Because he could see it in his mind, in his heart, right? Now, let me ask you a question. When he got through that, you think he didn't thank God? Do you know what thanking God is? It's recommitting. You ever thought about it like that? When you go through something tough, do you run from God or do you run to God? Right? Well, here's the crazy part. My recommitment Sunday, I've been thinking about this for a week. And I write something down, usually 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I wake up and I start typing. Thank goodness for autocorrect. right? Anytime we go through hard times and survive, we should be thankful and recommit to our God, or remind ourselves of our original commitment, salvation, and tell someone about it. Abraham did this whenever God originally called him away from his homeland, and he sent him to a new home. The land was Israel. I don't know if you remember the story of Abraham. Abraham's doing fine, living the life, lives in Ur of the Chaldeans. They're not positive if that's up by Baghdad or if that's down by Kuwait, because there's two Urs. But it's one of those. And God says, I need you. And he goes, who, me? Wait a minute, who are you? Abraham didn't know God. But God said, I need you to go to a land that I will tell you where it is, and I need you to follow me. But I need you to leave your home to do it. And Abraham said, okay, what is that? A commitment. And then Abraham listened to God for 100 years. Everywhere he went, I say it happened every 10 years is what it looks like. And every 10 years, I feel like God goes, okay, now that you've gone straight for 200 miles, 250 miles, you say, is that all he traveled? Well, he had sheep and servants and tents, and he basically moved a city everywhere he went. By the time he gets to the area of Sodom and Gomorrah with Lot, right, they think he's a king. Why? Because he's got this entourage that goes everywhere he goes. But about every 10 years, God would say, okay, I need you to go that way for about 250 miles. Now I need you to go that way for about 150 miles. I need you to go that way for about 250 miles. And then I need you to hang a hard left. And when you come to a river named the Jordan, you'll be there. But don't you cross that river till I tell you to. What did Abraham do every time? Yes, sir. And he would build an altar. What's an altar? A commitment. He would offer an animal as a sacrifice for his sins and for the glory of God, because God had spoken to him. What else did he do while he was traveling around like this? Told people what he was doing. And you know what they thought? You're crazy. Do you know what was funny? By the time he gets to Sodom and Gomorrah area, they don't think he's crazy anymore. In fact, something's up with this guy. You remember the story? Lot wanted to live over here. That was his nephew. And Abraham wanted to live over here because they had so many sheep and goats that the land couldn't support all of them, so they separated. And then this king came out of the north, and he took Lot and his whole family, all of his kids and all of his possessions, and took off. Abraham says, oh, that ain't happening. And Abraham went and got him. And two other kings had been raided in that area too, and they came to him and said, can we get in to this little warfare thing and go get our stuff too? Sure, come on. Those two other kings had thousands of people under their care. Abraham had 250. It sounds like something that we see in the Bible all the time, right? God don't care how many you got, it's are you committed, right? I love it under Gideon, right? Gideon told God, I'll do anything for you. This is after God called him a mighty warrior, and Gideon wasn't sure if he was a mighty warrior, right? I love that because Gideon's hiding, right? And he's throwing up the wheat, and the chaff is coming off because the Medes or the Moabites have nearly completely starved him to death, and so he's hiding and he's flipping the wheat up so they can make bread, but he don't want nobody to see him. And all of a sudden there's this cat sitting by the tree, and he goes, hey, mighty warrior. Who's the mighty warrior? Who are you talking to? You, mighty warrior. What? But what happens by the time it's all over with? The people said, by the sword of the Lord and Gideon, we have taken back our land. What do you think Gideon had to do to get there? Had to commit. And then every time he had a problem, he had to recommit. Right? And I love it. just for God to show off a little bit, and that one battle, right? God said, get your men together and let's go fight this battle. And Gideon says, okay, and he shows up with 10,000 guys. And God goes, that's too many. He said, why don't you have them do this? Anybody who doesn't do this, they can go home. And one of the first questions was, anybody here that's afraid you can go home? 9,000 of them left. That's not a question you ask people in your platoon. Don't ask them if they're afraid, and they can go home. Well, it kept dwindling down, and finally God goes, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I only want the guys, I want them all to go down to drink the water, and anybody who scoops up the water with their hands, send them home. Anybody that laps like a dog, that's who I want. What? That is the last people you want. That's called lazy. I can't even, no. And God goes, 300, perfect. Now let's go fight that battlefield with 50,000 guys in it. And then God did something that day that was amazing. And if you want to read the rest of that story, you've got to go look it up. Now here's the fun part. And don't look at me and go, oh, he don't know the rest of the story. Oh, no, I know the rest of the story. But I want you to read it. Well, here's the fun part. God used a guy who shouldn't have been used because he was committed and because he constantly recommitted. You know what the Psalms are? All the Psalms in the Bible? They're a story of commitment and recommitment. Commitment, recommitment. Half the time, David is recommitting from mistakes he made that cost a lot of people their lives. And he didn't die, and he would recommit, and God would bless him. Other times, it's because things were happening to him that were out of his control, and he would turn to God, and God would eradicate it or fix it, and David would recommit. Other times, he would turn to God, and God didn't fix it at all. In fact, it got worse, and he'd recommit. So why am I recommitting over the cancer battle? Because the first 6 months of my battle, after the surgery, I should say, 2 years ago, and then come back 6 months from that, I was still in shock that I was still here. But why did I recommit? Because I realized God had purpose. See, the reason we recommit to things is when we realize there's purpose in it. Let me ask you a question. Is there purpose in sickness? Most of us think, I like the answers you were given right there, but most of us in our heart goes, is there anything good comes out of sickness? Yes, your immune system gets better. Do you know when COVID happened, I was 5 months, 6 months out of hard chemo and liver surgery. The key to your immune system is your liver. Do you know where my capacity of immunity was? How'd that happen? I don't know, but just so God would say I needed to trust him. You know the one area that it was low in, extremely low, in fact almost invisible? Viruses. So why wasn't I afraid? I just faced death. Why am I afraid of a virus? Even if it killed me. If it killed me in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, that would be better than that 4 months of that hard chemo that was killing me every day, and I was ingesting it on purpose. I told Michelle, I said, this ain't going to be nothing for me. Even if I get it. She goes, that's crazy, Jim. Well, that's the part of me she likes that she don't like, right? Now, where's the purpose? So the children of Israel, when Moses got in charge, and who put him there? God did. Every time they did something and God showed up, they would build an altar. What is an altar? Recommitment. You know what happened when they crossed over the Red Sea? They wrote a song. And you find it in Exodus. And they sung that song every year at a certain Passover. And they're still singing it to this day. You know how long that's been? About 3,500 years. Every time they sing that song, what are they doing? Remembering what God did in Egypt as He brought them across the Red Sea. And a lot of people will go, that's not history. Oh, really? You need to look it up on YouTube. They found a bunch of chariot wheels. Yeah, with crustaceans all over them. How long has it been since we used chariots? You think somebody just put them there the other day? Yeah. Yeah. And the drawbar? They found them. How come that don't meet mainstream media? Because it doesn't fit the narrative that the Bible is a lie. The Bible's not a lie. It's His story. And it will be proclaimed even if He's got use a bunch of knuckleheads to do it. Right? Why is it I'm committed? I was talking to somebody out in the hall. We were talking about how every time we try to stray away and do it our way. Now, it doesn't happen to everybody. Some people become millionaires doing it that way. And Americans look at that and go, that's successful. But if they commit suicide next year, is it success? When the stock market crashes, right? What? Is that success? Or is success following the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself? That's what Jesus said success was. Is there anything wrong with money? No, just don't worship it. Is there anything wrong with anything other than God? No, just don't worship it. So what's the difference with God? He is meant to be worshiped. He created us in His image. We're the only thing on the planet created in His image. We need to willingly commit to the one who made us. It's that simple. Now, what separates us from the animals? They don't willingly do anything. What's God after? Willing participants. Because in the end, in Revelations, every knee's going to bow, every tongue's going to confess that Jesus is Lord. Why? Because He is. Why will they do it? Out of fear. Why do we do it? Out of respect. Out of understanding what God did in me. Why do I recommit? Because I've been through some hell and back, baby. Some self-inflicted, and some God testing and proving and showing that He's live and real in me. And why do you go through some of the problems you do? Some of them choice. I know for me, every time I popped another pill or drank another fifth or drove behind the wheel of a vehicle stupidly, which was most of the time, I did it willingly, but I was also deceived because I thought I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof. I'm not. None of us are. But what are we? We are created and made in the image of God, right? So when the children of Israel finally crossed over the Jordan, which is previously where Abraham had crossed over, they stepped into that river at flood stage. A lot of people think, that ain't no different than walking across a thin part of the Red River. Yeah, but have you ever crossed with 5 or 6 people across the Red River just walking across it? What does the 5th person start to do? Sink. You ever stepped on mushy ground and stepped on it a lot? What happens? You sink. How would you like if you crossed over with 1 million people? What do you think would happen? You're going to lose about 2/3 of them pretty quick. So it's significant that when the priest put their foot in the water, it receded and became dry. There's the miracle. The reseeding is one thing, but the dry ground underneath. You know, I remember years ago, my daughter, we were building this hotel up in Guthrie, and they'd been draining a couple ponds. They were going to clean them out, right? Because they wanted it all to look nice when the motel was done. And my daughter looked out there and she goes, "Dad, look at that. Look at that. It looks like, like there's these broken parts all over the place. Can you pick those up?" I said, "If you could get them out." I don't know if you've ever seen a pond dry up, but that's what it does. It separates and cracks and all that. And those cracks will be that deep. And she says, "I'll go out there and get one." I said, "Nah, it'd be better if you didn't." She said, "No, but I can." I said, "Oh, I know you can, but it'd be better if you don't." And she goes, "Will I get in trouble if I go?" "No, in fact, you know what? This might be a good lesson." And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm backing my truck down toward the edge of the pond." "Why are you doing that?" "Why are you getting that water hose out of the back of it?" "I've just got it here like a lasso, just in case, because I don't have a rope." "Why are you doing that?" "I don't know, just go walk out in the pond." And she walks out, she's tender at first, and then all of a sudden she goes thunk down about a foot. I go, "Keep going." She goes, "Really?" By the time it's all over with, she's this deep, and I'm throwing her the hose. I said, "Hang on," and I tied it to the trailer hitch and drug her out. We all laughed. We got pictures, because now she's got what looks like half of her body's a different color. Why did I do that? So that she would learn a lesson safely. Why do you go through things? So that you will learn a lesson safely. And then when we come through it, we recommit to the one who let us learn the lesson. The children of Israel did the same thing, and so when they crossed over the Jordan, God told them, "I want you to stack up 12 stones on the other side of the river, wherever you camped that night, as a memorial to what I did to let you cross this river." And do you know where those stones are? 3,000 years later? No, 3,500 years later? Still right where they stacked them. They're there as a memorial. When Abraham went across, you remember that story? He gets across and God goes, "Okay, I need you to build me an altar." He built an altar. Right? And Abraham says, actually it was Isaac, said, "Where's the sacrifice?" And Abraham said, "God will provide." And then God said, "Abraham, put your son up there." Now a lot of people get a really interesting picture there. We see somebody 4, 5, 6 years old. But when they don't tell you how old it is, but when you see the time that progresses from the time that Isaac is born, you know how old I think he is? 33. Because he's a picture of Jesus. So how did he get up there? Abraham said, "Isaac, I need you to get on the altar." "Okay, Dad." Why would he do that? Why would he just trust him? Because he'd trusted him his whole life. Because his dad taught him that he's created in the image of God and God has purpose for everything. And I think Abraham said, "Get on the altar," and he got on the altar. He said, "Now, according to the law that God has given me, I need to bind you." So he holds his hands up and his feet and he binds them. And then he takes out a knife and he gets ready to sacrifice him because there has to be blood on the altar. And as he's fixing to come down, God says, "Abraham, Abraham!" Why does he say it a second time? Because Abraham is committed. "Look, I've provided a ram." So he took the ram, untied his son, put the ram up there, and they both sacrificed him. So how did we get Israel? Abraham is the father of Isaac. Isaac is the father of Jacob. And Jacob's name is changed to Israel. And he has 12 sons, which 12 sons crossed that Jordan River. And that pillar is still there to this day, where they stacked those 12 stones. Now check this out. You know the Muslim mosque that's on top of the Temple Mount? Do you know what's underneath that? The rock that Abraham sacrificed Isaac on. It's still there to this day. Now, why is that? Because even the Arabs tell that story. I think when you have two people groups telling the same story, you got to consider that truth. See, when people tell you that the Bible's not true, they're the idiot. I'm sorry, but it's that real. Now, with any idiot, what do you do when you recognize they're deceived? You help them. You're committed to what you do, so you help them. And in helping them, you share who Jesus is and why he came and why he sacrificed his life for you, so that they now will have purpose. And they can be committed to that purpose. We need to recognize, especially when we've been really sick or almost die, and come through it, that God is giving you more time. Or it's just part of your journey. For whatever purpose he is giving you to do, and we need to refocus on that purpose or listen for his voice to tell us what to do next. It's so simple. Have you ever wondered what your purpose is? What is your purpose? I want to hear from you. Tell me what your purpose is. Serve God. You don't have to top it. It can be anything, you know. What's your purpose? Preach the gospel. Do you have to be a preacher to do it? No. Anybody else? Watch this. God gave me this last night at 2 a.m. It is so simple. It is to give glory with all your heart, you know, on purpose. That's what your purpose is. You know, most Christians struggle in their life is, what's my purpose? What does God want me to do? Because most of us that we know are Americans, and Americans say everything that is great has to be pie in the sky. And so it's got to look like this. Somebody wants my job, or I want their job, or I want to do what they're doing because there's purpose in that. We're like a bunch of followers rather than following the one who made us. Right? So what is your purpose? Your purpose is to glorify God in all that you do. And as I've told you before, David showed us how to show your purpose even when you make mistakes. You repent. And you learn from it. You know, just like my daughter, to this day, will not walk into a pond that is dry. And you know what I don't do? I don't touch motorcycle pipes when they're hot. I got a scar here, and one here, and one here from trying to wear shorts and wear a motorcycle. Don't do it. So what do I learn? I learn that my purpose is to follow the one who made me. Yeah, animals do what God designed them to do. Humans do, on some levels, what God has designed them to do. But most of the time, humans do all the things God did not design them to do. It's called free will. Now, if my will is going to be lining up with God's will, that means I have to commit to God and then begin to do what he wants me to do, which is called purpose. Right? So my purpose, Jesus told us, is to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. If we're doing those things, we are fulfilling our purpose. Now, This morning, even though it's my recommitment Sunday, that's what I'm calling it, when it really started on Friday, right? It really started on Thursday night in anticipation of Friday, the 2-year mark, right? And it's not, honestly, it's not because I'm a survivor or I'm alive. It's because I want to do something if he left me here. I want to. Why did he do that? Well, he did that to fulfill his purpose. And if you remember what it says in the scripture, Jesus said, if my people, what was it when he was coming into the city of Jerusalem on the back of the donkey, and the people were laying down the palm fronds and saying, glory to God in all the highest, peace on earth, goodwill to all men. They were saying all that stuff, and glory to God in the highest. The Messiah has arrived, and the Pharisee says, can you make them shut up? And he says, basically, if they don't say it, the rocks will cry out. See? I like not being a rock. I like being something with free will that can choose. Because here's the deal. In Revelation, it says, every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. The majority of the world is going to do that in absolute fear and terror when they realize that they were idiots. We, on the other hand, are going to do it willingly because we've already been doing it willingly because we've already accepted what he committed to us. It's called salvation. And so part of what I want you to be thinking about today, and if you want to do this, if there's anybody here who's never asked Jesus to be their Savior, I want you to do that today. And you can come forward to do that. You can talk to me after and do that. But then the other side of this is, I would also like to see recommitment in us, because all of us have been through something here lately, right? A year and a half of COVID, we've all been through something lately, right? Job losses, we've been through something lately. Death, we've been through something lately. So let's recommit. My challenge is, let us recommit our lives to Jesus Christ, the one who we're created in the image of, and the one we serve because he came and served us through his death, burial, and resurrection. We'll have a song, and you can come down and be with me in that. You can come to the altar and get with me later. I just want the invitation to be there.